Hello, everyone. Good morning to some of you, good afternoon, and good night to some of the others. I've seen some of the messages in the lobby, so we have a very diverse community as expected. Many of you are joining from North America, some from Europe and Asia. So want to first of all welcome all of you to the Node-RED Conference 2025. I will pass the mic to Nick O'Leary in just a moment for the keynote. I did want to set the stage a little bit with a couple of announcements on the logistical side, and then obviously make a few opening remarks for the conference. So a couple of things as people trickle in. There's going to be a few buttons on the bottom of Zoom. There is a chat session. For those of you who have used Zoom before, you can simply send messages or send messages directly amongst each other. You can also there's going to be a Q&A type of a field in some of the other sessions where you can ask some of the speakers questions that you would like to be brought up. There's going to be a separation between the lobby and the session, so I encourage you to transition to the next session as this one closes, and you can do that from the lobby by pressing the join button on every session as it begins. So basically, we're going to end a session and then you can join the next one at the appropriate time. There's going to be some breaks. You should be able to see the schedule for your time zone specifically from within the lobby. Now, it is my pleasure, obviously, to welcome all of you to Node-RED Conference 2025. It is a very diverse group of individuals. I still remember the first time that I had the opportunity to use Node-RED on one of my projects, and this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was deploying. And so my basically background is in manufacturing and industrial automation. I was working on a fairly complex data project involving Kepware servers, and we were pulling data from the manufacturing plant floor, from PLCs, IPCs, and a variety of different devices. And as you can imagine, in those industries, it is fairly complex. And so one colleague of mine, and I would assume that this is the introduction to Node-RED for many of you, was able to give me a call and basically let me know that there is a better alternative than some of the closed and proprietary solutions out there. And so he made the introduction to Node-RED, upon which I was able to basically go home and tinker very quickly with some of the PLCs and solutions, pull the data and share it using MQTT and OPC UA tags if you're familiar with those types of environments. Now, today it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, you've probably already looked at the schedule of the different sessions. We're going to have talks from very different backgrounds, people from the financial side, people that are coming from the gaming perspective. Some of them are going to be presenting applications that they're using for full-on production environments in B2B settings, which I think is incredibly interesting. We're going to have a talk on AI and MCP servers, which is top of mind for many different individuals as well as companies. Now, what I'm excited for is, of course, as I've mentioned already, we have a very diverse audience. And those of you who are joining might be just finding out about Node-RED. Some of you may have been using it for many, many years. Regardless, you are absolutely welcome in the community. I know that some of you, like I said, are perhaps working on simple proof of concept projects, maybe as a student, maybe you're learning new technologies and you're looking to pull data and understand what's going on with the different systems. You're looking to store that in databases. You're looking to understand or create some of the dashboarding solutions that have been publicly available by Node-RED for many months now, if not years. Some of you are using it, like I said, in B2B solutions. We're going to see energy monitoring. We're going to see home applications. So I think it makes it extremely exciting for today in terms of the different talks. Now, I want to also acknowledge the organizers of the event that I know have been very tirelessly making sure that everything goes smoothly. So a huge thanks to the sponsors, as you can see them in the screen. So FlowFuse and OpenJS Foundation. There's been some organizers on both ends that made sure that everything goes well, prepared the speakers. So a huge thanks to all of them. And I want to leave you basically with three main takeaways for today. So number one, I encourage you to explore some of the new nodes that you may not have been familiar with that will be presented by some of the speakers. And if you have the opportunity or the time to implement some of the nodes yourself, I think that would be going the extra mile to understand their functionality, how you can perhaps leverage them in some of your projects. Number two, again, listen into the solutions outside of your industry. As I've mentioned, my background is in industrial automation, but I am very curious how this is applied in the financial setting, in the energy monitoring setting. I believe that anyone can learn a different perspective or a different way of doing things from an industry they are not necessarily intimately familiar with. And number three, but not the least, last but not least, is network with the colleagues or individuals that are attending every session. You will get a chance, as I have mentioned, to ask certain questions. Make sure to reach out to some of the speakers, but also while you're maybe waiting in the lobby or you've seen an interesting comment from a colleague or someone who is part of the community, reach out to them with a question, reach out to them with a connection, and make sure that you develop a professional network that is part of the Node-RED community. Without any further ado, we have Nick O'Leary scheduled for the to kick off the conference with his keynote. So I would like to welcome Nick on the main stage to obviously give an introduction. I'm assuming that many of you know Nick very well if you've been part of the community for a while. But Nick, give us an introduction, and obviously the stage is yours for the presentation.
Well, thanks, Vlad. Let me just get my slides up. There we go. Hopefully that's all coming through nice and clearly. Um, well, yes, welcome everyone. It's great to see so many of you here. These events don't just happen. Vlad's already alluded to the great team behind the scenes who've done so much work to get us to this point. I'm super excited to be able to kick off today and just talk a little bit around the Node-RED project as a whole. So for those who don't know me, I'm Nick O'Leary. I'm the Node-RED co-creator, the FlowFuse CTO. And basically Node-RED's all my fault. Alongside my colleague about 13 years ago now, Dave Conway-Jones at IBM, we came up with Node-RED. And I won't retell the whole story. It's out there. Many of you are already familiar with it, but we were able to turn what was a useful little side project tool of ours into something which is now bringing well over 1,700 registrants to this event. A huge footprint of a project right now, which is awesome to see. So in this talk, I just wanted to take this opportunity just to have a little think about where are we with the Node-RED project right now, and where are we going? So this isn't an introduction to Node-RED. I'm sort of going to take a little bit granted. I know, as Vlad implied, that there are some of you, and I've already seen in the chat, some people who are new to Node-RED. And it's awesome to see you guys. This is a bit sort of going to assume you guys are familiar with what Node-RED's all about. But where are we? So here we are, 13 years on from when we first open sourced it at the start of September, 13 years ago. We've done 193 releases in that time, coming up to 10,000 commits, well over 200 individual contributors to the project over that time, thousands of merged PRs, the community growth of nodes that have been created. I mean, as of earlier today, 5,673. I mean, this has been one of the big strengths and successes of Node-RED is the fact that you, the community, are able to extend what it does, implement nodes to help it connect to new things. And without that, it wouldn't be what it is today, because you've all been empowered through the open source nature and the community around Node-RED to do that. Other raw stats we have, 30,000 weekly npm installs, 1.8 million roughly, it fluctuates a bit, but monthly Docker pulls. I mean, these are huge numbers. They're also fairly abstract numbers, and it can be a bit tricky to understand what does that really mean. And also, when we look back at the past year of the project, um, we have lost some momentum, I think is the very honest and critical way of reflecting. We've done the 4.1 release earlier this year. This was the release schedule that we had lined up. I think this was first published about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Uh, this was our intended timeline to get 4.x out last year, to be well under the 5.x stream by now. And that's not how things have worked out. And this is kind of the reflection of open source projects are very much reliant on who turns up to do the work. And whilst we've continued to invest in Node-RED and continue to drive it forward, the pace hasn't been where we want it to be. So we've taken a bit of time recently just to think, okay, how can we reinvigorate get some more energy, help Node-RED continue to innovate and continue to move forward? Because whilst it's awesome what it does, and lots of people continue to adopt it and continue to benefit from it, we don't want to be complacent. There's so much more to be done that we could be doing to make Node-RED an even better experience. So that's one of the things I wanted to kind of reflect on in this talk over the next 20, 25 minutes or so. And there will be plenty of opportunities for questions at the end. So please do dive in. If you have any questions about stuff I'm asking about, stick them in the chat, and we'll try and get to those towards the end. I mentioned a bit about the npm install stats, 30,000 weekly npm installs. Now, one of the questions we've always had is how many Node-RED users are there really? What is that? What is the true footprint? So when we look at the raw npm stats, we can get this sort of breakdown. So this is numbers I picked up this morning. So the 4.1 stream in the last 7 days has had 18,000 installs. The 3.1, the latest maintenance release of 3.1, has had 2,000 installs. 2.2 has had 600 installs. 1.3 has had, I'd be intrigued to know who's still installing 1.3 and 2.2, but it's also true to say, I've looked at the npm stats quite frequently over the years, and they don't necessarily reflect true usage. They reflect someone has run, or something has run, an npm install command, and it's pulled down the package, and that's a tick in the box for a stat. And one of the interesting things I see when I look at these, sometimes we'll see some weird spikes in the numbers, but then I'll go to look at some other npm modules completely unrelated to Node-RED, and we'll see the same pattern of spikes, which does mean there's a lot of noise in these stats. I do firmly believe, whilst 152 installs of 1.3 in the last 7 days, my gut instinct is majority of those are bots, security scanners, all those sorts of things going on. They're not true users. But it does beg the question, how many people are actually using Node-RED? So this is one of the things we did in 4.1 that we released earlier this year. So we provided an update notification mechanism within Node-RED, which in return for being notified when there are updates available, we get back a little ping once a day just saying this is a Node-RED that's running. It tells us what Node-RED version is being run, what Node.js version is being run, and operating system details, what OS and what architecture. And to be super clear, there is absolutely nothing in that any details of your flows, how things are configured, about your users, anything like that. It is purely just let us know that a Node-RED exists running this version, so we can start to get a sense of what's going on. And for those who've already upgraded to 4.1, you would have seen you can opt out of this telemetry if you don't want to share that data. But thankfully, lots of people have been sharing data. And to be clear, because it's one of those topics that people are always concerned about. There is nothing related to your configuration about your actual flows or all that that's shared. It is purely just what version of things are running. So here you can see this is the latest data. That green line is the total number of Node-REDs pinging home each day. And to be clear, this has only been enabled since 4.1. And you can see it's been a pretty steady growth. Now there's this super curious bump it looks like a couple thousand Node-REDs get turned off at the end of Friday and get turned back on Monday. Um, and that's been present in the data since the very start. And it's fascinating to see. But these are the sorts of curious insights we can now start building around this information. So you can see, because we know what versions of Node-RED, you can see where we released the 4.1.1 maintenance release in early October. So that blue line is the 4.1.0 installs dropping off as they get upgraded. But a steady, continuous growth of Node-REDs being updated to the 4.1 release. Now, that's it's really interesting to see, because now this is for the first time the project's got some real sort of concrete insight in terms of how Node-RED, the growth of Node-RED, how these versions are being adopted, and over time as we release new versions, and we're going to talk more about new versions through this talk. It's going to be interesting to see how well that maps to the adoption, and we're going to be able to do some further comparisons because we've got the npm install stats. Can we get a better sense of how the npm install stats map to this true usage? Because these ping home, the usage telemetry we added is the Node-RED will call home, I think it's 1 hour after Node-RED starts. So if you're restarting Node-RED a lot, doing development work, we're not constantly pinging home. So it's a Node-RED that's been running for a while, and then it pings home once a day at the same time each day. So these are genuinely long-running instances of Node-RED, which is awesome to see this level of growth. For those wondering, the orange other line along the bottom, which is almost negligible, those are sort of beta versions, internal versions, development versions, where we kind of expect that to be pretty small numbers of core contributors running pre-release versions. But yeah, so it's great to see. Now, one of the things we said when we announced this feature as part of 4.1 was that we would be sharing this data. So this dashboard, which I'm showing now, also has graphs on the current spread of Node.js versions and OS types, is publicly available. So telemetry.node-red.org is there. And now I'm not going to pay attention to the thundering herd if you're all now busy typing that into your browser and a few hundred people hit the site. We'll figure that out if there are any problems once I'm done talking. But the site is there, and we'll continue building on this, looking at what other insights can we overlay on this, what else is useful to do with this useful to do with this information. Certainly, one of the insights when we look at the Node.js versions is how prevalent Node 20 is. All things considered, Node 20 is in maintenance and reaches end of life in, I think, end of April next year. But equally, our Node-RED latest tagged Docker container is built on Node 20 still. So hopefully we'll see that shift over time. As again, I'll talk a bit more about our plans for the future roadmap of versions of Node-RED. So that's there. I should say that there are a few things like this that I'm sharing throughout this talk. There will be follow-up blog posts through the week and into next week on node-red.org, and we'll link to from the forum. So we will share more details as we go, and hopefully, start an interesting conversation about what other insights can we start gaining from this data. One of the other things we did earlier in this year was a community survey, which was a bit more focused around the state of Node-RED's user experience. So the next thing we're able to share now are some of the results and insights from that survey. And again, this is now online for people to browse in their own time. And again, I'll share a link, although the eagle-eyed might spot the link in that screenshot. And again, we'll have stuff on the Node-RED blog sharing this for the wider community. So don't feel the need to capture all the URLs as I flick through this. So this survey was very much aimed at, unlike previous community surveys we'd done, I think, well, for one thing, it was coordinated by a guy contributing to the project, Dimitri, who has a lot of design experience, understands how to do community surveys. I think put a lot more thought in terms of the analysis of the results compared to the ones we've done in the past. Um, and it was very much trying to get a clear sense of where the community stands on the future of the project, in terms of uh, what sort of things they would like to see and what sort of things they wouldn't like to see, which is also a very useful insight. Um, I'm not going to go through all the individual results. Like I said, we'll share links to this on the blog in the next few days so you can delve in. And the site Dimitri's put together is a great site for browsing all these results. You can filter it down by cohorts of participants. It's super powerful. Um, but in terms of the sorts of people who were responding, we had a nice spread of experience of the people who were responding. So it wasn't just people who've been using it for a long time or preferred not to say, um, but people who are relatively new as well as veteran, which is important that we don't want to skew this based on people who are used to some of the choices made in Node-RED. We want to get the sort of the fresh eyes. Interesting to see the spread of how many Node-RED instances people are running or managing. You know, a lot of people running more than one instance. Primary posts are using Node-RED, a lot of, sort of hobbyist and personal projects, but then ever-growing types of professional uses. And how people self-describe their complexity, great spread from very simple flows up to very advanced, up to even some sort of enterprise scale deployments. So again, it feels like we've got a good cross-section of the community and quite well representative of these different cohorts. The industries that people are in, again, technology, software, manufacturing, industrial, and utilities, a good spread. But it kind of aligns with where the feel we have for it. Why people choose to use Node-RED, and this was a fascinating piece around yeah, a strong leaning towards the fact it's open source and it is free to use, which is a powerful incentive. The ease of use, the visual flow-based programming, all great motivators for why people use Node-RED over the alternatives. The strength of the community. Again, I've said this in previous talks. It's one of the things I am most proud of with what we've built with Node-RED is the strength of the community around it. Overall satisfaction, a nice solid sort of high end on a scale of 1 to 7, and 6 and 7. How likely you recommend it to a colleague, typical NPS type thing. Again, people are fans of Node-RED, and that's always great to see. I think it's also important we get from feedback from those who aren't fans of Node-RED because we want to understand what we can improve. And that was one of the questions we suddenly asked. What does frustrate you most about Node-RED? Top of the list were debugging flows and troubleshooting issues, understanding what's changed and how you manage version control and diffing, which is a hard problem in a visual environment. Some of the One of the strengths of Node-RED is the huge community of nodes. One of the challenges around that then is also just the variable quality and reliability of those nodes. And I think that's something we want to look at carefully for around how we can improve this in the Node-RED community. Various other items, I'm not going to read out them all. I do recommend you go have a look, but certainly there's a lot of data points through this, which has kind of helped inform some of our thinking about what we can do to improve. Overall satisfaction ratings by device type. Now, this was an interesting one because we sort of know the particularly smartphone or tablet, the touch experience isn't so strong. It's not been optimized. So, a nice strong liking on the desktop, laptop side. On tablet and smartphone, it's a bit more mixed, but not as strong a feeling. So that's something I think we should be more aware of and more considerate of, shall I say, as we move forward. Single biggest improvement that Node-RED needs. And again, a lot of this was trying to get a better feel for what's the community's sense of where we need to improve things. UI, UX, and visual improvements. So this is sort of a bucket around a modernization of the user interface, improving some of the visual design, and overall user experience. And yeah, again, that's quite a broad topic, but it came out quite strong. Interesting one around AI integration. Clearly that is a super hot topic. Um, it's interesting when you dig into some more of the data. There's which I haven't actually pulled up the graphs for. There's a some interesting thoughts around AI integration in the open source version of Node-RED and where that belongs. And certainly that's something we do want to look at, but not something I'm going to dwell too much on in this in our sort of immediate plans with what we're talking around here. So again, we've got configuration usability, debugging development tools, uh, lots of areas for us to be very considerate of. But a common comment we've had is this sort of that the Node-RED user experience feels a bit dated or doesn't feel modern. Um, and what missing features would most improve your Node-RED experience? Better dashboard creation tools. Now that's sort of a question for Node-RED dashboard. Well, with the FlowFuse sponsored dashboard or the other community dashboards that exist. I'm not going to dwell on that one as I'm sort of focused more on the core Node-RED experience, but we certainly want to make sure we learn from and are able to have a roadmap for dashboarding because I think data visualization is a very important part of the Node-RED experience. But enhanced debugging, troubleshooting capabilities, um, better version control, better flow organization. Again, these are kind of headlines, and the full survey results has a lot more sort of detail underpinning them. In terms of getting started with Node-RED, how long did it take to feel comfortable with Node-RED? A nice, well, a good spread, a decent proportion of people feel they can get up to speed very quickly. Some people very honest and say they're still learning. To be honest, I feel like I still learn as well. People often ask me what's the best way to do X or Y with Node-RED, and I'm like, well, I know how I do it, but just because I created Node-RED, I'm not going to claim to be uh, the expert at exactly how you should implement something. And I often say, you should implement it the way that feels right to you, and dodge the question. Getting started, what would make learning Node-RED easier for newcomers? More examples and use cases, and a better documentation, video tutorials. I mean, this is all sort of non-code stuff in a way about what we can improve with Node-RED, but it's important because um, whilst, if we go back to how long does it take to feel comfortable with Node-RED, it would be great to recognize how can we get more people empowered with Node-RED in 5 minutes or within a day of playing with Node-RED. And yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting content that we in the project should be looking at. Um, so there's that. Um, if you could change one thing about Node-RED, what would it be? A decent proportion said no, well, nothing. But again, it's kind of reflecting, it's different ways of framing a similar set of questions, uh, improving some of the dashboarding and UI, improving the debug experience. An interesting one here about how would you feel about changes? So Node-RED branding, the overall visual design, because one of the things is we don't want to come along and lose the Node-RED identity by trying to make things better. So it's important that we understand what is the community's appetite for change and how can we build on that to make sure what we do is in partnership with the community moving forward. So a whistle stop, there's so many other graphs, so much more insight. It's not linked to anywhere yet. We will be publishing blog post and forum post linking to this with some more of the commentary around it in the next few days. So do check it out when that's shared. So really, a lot of this is feeding into the path to Node-RED 5. Um, and one of the key considerations all along has been evolution versus revolution. We don't we want to make sure Node-RED continues to evolve to be the best low-code tool for what it does. And we don't do that by losing sight of what we are today. And in terms of modernizing the Node experience, we see there are very much two areas. There's the user experience for Node-RED users that many of you are, but just as important in many ways for the sustainability of the project is improving the developer experience of those who want to contribute to the Node-RED project. So I'm going to look at these two, touch on these two separately. Obviously, for the vast majority of this audience, it's what have we got in mind for the user experience? So this is what we proposed Node-RED 5. No, this is what Node-RED looked like about 10 years ago, if not earlier. It's the earliest screenshot I could find, although I know for a fact um, uh, it looked worse before it even got to this stage. I just don't, I haven't been able to take the Git repository back far enough to get a screenshot. But I think you will see it is kind of recognizably Node-RED. A lot of the key features haven't really changed. This is where we are today, and comparing those two, that's a big jump, but it is still recognizably Node-RED. And we want to think very much about how can we keep that moving forward, and keep bringing it, not letting it stagnate. So one of the things we've thought about, and this is based on user research as well, that the current structure is you've got the palette over the left, you've got your workspace in the minute, and then you've just got everything else stashed over on that right-hand side. And that can make it hard for users to discover features. It can make it hard to deal with if you're trying to debug flows. So you've got to have this choice. Well, I can either have my debug sidebar or I can look at the node information, that type of stuff. It's basically just too overloaded. So one of the things we're thinking about, and I'm sort of going to share a series of mocked up screenshots, and I should stress everything I'm showing you are sort of mock up ideas. Nothing is finalized. These are just sort of trying to paint a picture of, okay, well, what if we were to move the overview over to the left-hand side as well as the node palette. So you've got this good sort of foundation of this is what I've actually got in my flows or what I can add to my flows. And that basically gives you a better anchor for navigating what you've got. And then we've got some vertical space, so we could move the tab bars up. We could have a more unified search, because right now we've got lots of different search bars in different places. Have a more unified search, so it's easier to find what you're doing. And then also, I sort of jumped over it as I skipped slides. The ability to be able to have debug visible all of the time, as well as another sidebar. So again, common feedback around the debugability was the fact you end up having to lose sight of your debug in order to do other work within the editor. So these are the sorts of things we're looking at. And I say none of these designs are final at all. It is very much evolving the UI to make it more useful, make it more usable, make it easier for new users to find their way around. So it's a better flow of information. It gives you more space for your flows. It gives you more flexibility around being able to keep your debug in sight, or it might be you have whatever sidebars you want visible on the side, depending how you want to work. An area I've not really touched on, but improving the visual accessibility. So we know there are the current sort of color schemes. It's all a little faded. Some of those challenges are around accessibility. So we want to improve that. Light and dark theme built in. I mean, I know for many of you that might sound trivial, but yeah, there are plenty of people who want to have a dark theme, and there are some great community dark themes, but you've got to do work to get them. So we want to make sure as we develop this new visual identity of the editor that we have a built-in light and dark theme. And it's very much evolution, not revolution. So one of the things that Dimitri, who's been doing some of the design thinking behind this, he's built a platform that we can very quickly spin up publicly hosted versions of the Node-RED editor based on branches of code that we can spin up experiments around this UI. We can try something out without having to do full-on releases to get into people's hands. So hopefully in the coming days, weeks, you'll see us starting to share links to some experiments to get feedback. It's got sort of a feedback gathering mechanism built in. And yeah, we're going to see if this gives us a way to iterate quickly and allow people to start feedback and try an experiment without the burden of being committed to it. Try it, get the feedback, move on if it doesn't work. So again, this is something we'll share some more details with in the coming days. The other part of it, Node-RED modernization, as I said, the developer experience of contributing to Node-RED. One of the reasons our releases have slowed down somewhat through this year is we haven't had as many people actively contributing to the core. Not to take away from those who have, and every contribution is certainly valued, but it's there's certainly been a slowdown. So we want to take a step back and think, what else can we do in the core sort of project infrastructure to enable make it easier for people to contribute. So for those interested in contributing, there are actions around introducing standard linting to the code base, moving away from some of our customized repository structure and scripts we have to a more standard approach that didn't really exist well enough when we took the custom approach. Automating our release processes so we can do releases more regularly and more reliably, and immutable releases and provenance. These are obviously the security of the NPM ecosystem is very continually under threat as bad actors do things they shouldn't. So as we automate our release process, we want to look at some of these new features around immutable releases. So once it's published, it can't be changed on the GitHub side, and provenance so that you can have certainty that a version of the NPM package, exactly what commit did that get published from. So GitHub and NPM have done a lot of interesting work to enable this. We'll look at adopting that. So again, you can have more confidence in the security of what's being published. In terms of a schedule for all of this, I'd say this is what's on the website at the moment, although it does currently have a disclaimer saying it's out of date and we'll be updating it soon. Well, that update will be coming in the next few days. Now, when we talk about scheduling, a lot of it is based around the Node.js schedule. This is the Node.js schedule at the moment. Node 24 is their current release. It's going to be in support all the way through till April 2028. So what our plan is from this point forward, we're going to consider Node-RED 4 in active maintenance. So security updates, bug fixes, predominantly, and not necessarily new features. It will depend. Sometimes we will for pragmatic reasons. And then we're going to start the Node-RED 5 beta cycle as early as this week. There's not a lot to see for that yet, but we're going to be doing a prolonged beta process with Node-RED 5, lots of small iterations. We've got the experimentation framework to try some stuff out, but we'll also be doing beta releases to get this into the hands of people early. But expect that to be a moving target as we iterate on the UI improvements. So a lot of what I've talked about, we're not going to do that overnight. It's going to take some time to get there, but we're going to use the Node-RED 5 beta releases to regularly get things into the community's hands to try out. And we'll be moving to Node 24 as the default runtime. And the hope is that will then be published as the stable release as soon as it's ready. And I've got on here, it kind of implies at the turn of this year. It very much depends on the progress we make, but we kind of want to get there sooner rather than later so that it gives us then a stable base and we can start getting into exciting new stuff. Because a lot of what I talked about doesn't really cover shiny new features. It doesn't talk about the whole host of great ideas and discussions that are going on in the community about features that should be in Node-RED, like singleton subflows, graceful shutdown, a testing framework. All of these sorts of topics are still conversations of the community and we want to make progress on. But right now, we want to just take this opportunity to get this modernization in place, particularly with some of the developer experience stuff, the linting and some of those, they're a bit more disruptive to the code base to also then be doing significant code feature development in parallel. So we kind of want to get that stuff done, give ourselves a solid base moving forward. And of course, contributing means more than just code. Documentation, there's the Node-RED cookbook website, which hasn't had an update for a very long time. There's the website itself. There's the Flow library. We've started talking to people in the community super interested in seeing some user experience improvements there. We've got a bunch of Node-RED plugins, the debugger, the linter, and the Node-RED dashboard itself from FlowFuse. All of these are great areas to get involved. Many of them not code oriented. So if you're sat there thinking, well, I'm not a code developer, I don't know how to contribute, but you want to, as I said, there are plenty of opportunities and places for you to get stuck in. So that's the path to Node-RED 5. Keep your eyes out. We'll be publishing pieces throughout the rest of this week and early next week in terms of turning everything I've just rambled at you about into blog posts with more meat on the details there. And with that, I will wrap up with a few minutes left for questions. I will just say, thank you again to everyone for coming along. It's going to be a great series of talks through the day. I'm really excited to see them all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate it. There has certainly been a number of different questions that came in. I don't believe we'll be able to answer all of them in 3 minutes. But let me throw a couple of you. For anyone that doesn't get their question answered, I would encourage you to reach out to Nick directly. There's some basic ones and some more advanced. So there's a question around the licensing for business, right? So not for
Mhm.
personal use. Can you comment on the licensing model for Node-RED? Someone's looking to use that on a corporate level.
Absolutely. So Node-RED is the core of Node-RED is free to use without restriction. It's Apache 2 licensed. So it is true open source with a capital O, capital S, part of the OpenJS Foundation. So yeah, there are no costs, immediate costs of using open source Node-RED. Now, I also put my FlowFuse CTO hat on and say there are suddenly then options when you want to look for more than what the open source is able to offer you, and that do stick around for ZJ's talk later if that's relevance to you, because I think again, switching between my different hats, that is, we find, increasingly important for sort of the enterprise business user, but nothing prohibits you just getting on with Node-RED today.
Perfect. Second question, can you comment on the educational roadmap? Is there a schedule or timeline to release additional courses for Node-RED/FlowFuse? And are there any plans? This was a comment also in the chat to create
Yep.
some kind of a Node-RED university.
So Node-RED Academy, great set of courses. FlowFuse has funded and put into place. Yes, we want to produce more content there. We don't have exact timelines. We've certainly got plans. We just haven't got timelines on that at the moment. So yeah, we want to be producing more content, both in the core of Node-RED, but also where there are other opportunities like Node-RED Academy as well. So yeah, watch this space.
Okay. Question on the hardware side. So people are asking, are there benchmarks for deploying Node-RED on various hardware that you're able to perhaps share? So Raspberry Pi versions, BeagleBones, the new Qualcomm Arduino that was just released, IPCs, Dell hardware. People are
Yeah.
curious if there's
So
benchmarks being.
we don't have formal benchmarks for them. We have anecdotal evidence. People have been running Node-RED very successfully, very happily on Raspberry Pis since the very early days of Raspberry Pi. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's safe to say it runs as the Raspberry Pis get more powerful. It's continues to just support Node-RED super well. I'm super interested with the Qualcomm Arduino stuff. I, uh, I look forward to seeing what opportunities that opens up, but early days for that one to have a view on it yet.
Absolutely. Last question before we go to the next session. You made some comments on the cybersecurity side. Again, there's a lot of curiosity with the current EU legislations, especially if there's going to be more developers put on that front from the Node-RED side.
Yeah, the cybersecurity stuff. we need to work out what our responsibilities will be around that, both again as FlowFuse, but also as an open source project. Um, I don't have specific plans, but part of a lot of our release automation and reducing some of our cycle times for releases very much is mindful of making sure we're able to respond quicker and quickly to any security reports in the future, which is part of the responsibilities that the Act brings in. But yeah, we need to do more to understand some of those requirements.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. I encourage everybody to join the next session. We'll close this one from the lobby. You can click the join key and we'll see the conversation from Felix in just a minute. Thank you so much, Nick. Appreciate it. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.